Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Wellbeing in Q Time series. Today, our topic is Move More in Quarantine. I'm Setu, a UNSW medical student from Myanmar. I'm also a health and wellbeing ambassador at UNSW and have a strong interest in public health, mental health, and sexual health. I acknowledge that I'm recording this webinar from the lands of the Badigal people, and I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you are watching from today. So today, we're focusing on the physical and mental health benefits of exercise. You may be planning to spending your quarantine time by watching Netflix and chilling, which is okay now and again, but we're going to explore why you could really benefit from being active even from your room. I'm joined today by accredited exercise physiologist, Dr. Oscar Letterman, who is also a clinical lead at Keeping the Body in Mind, and adjunct associate lecturer at UNSW. Oscar's research and industry contribution and advocacy in the mental health field has been key in defining the role and scope of practice of exercise professionals in mental health care. Oscar is frequently involved in research activities and has published and presented extensively with local and international researchers. Hello, Oscar. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Setu. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I understand that you're an exercise physiologist. Could you tell us a little bit more about what that involves?
Sure. So an exercise physiologist is a clinical profession. In Australia, they're recognised as allied health professionals. Sort of like a physiotherapist or a social worker or a psychologist is also an allied health professional. However, an exercise physiologist focuses on how they can use what we know with the evidence around exercise to help treat and manage people with chronic health conditions. So that might be someone with cancer or diabetes or cardiovascular disease or chronic pain, or even someone that's rehabilitating from an injury. So we exercise physiologists working within a range of different clinical populations. But my focus where I work is in mental health.
Yeah, that's so great. So you basically help your clients with staying active with all sorts of issues and environments. What about for someone in a hotel quarantine? Is it really possible for them to stay active in their room?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I think it's particularly hard. It's going to depend on the amount of space within that room as well, and potentially what equipment and facilities they have. But it is definitely possible to remain active during that time. And it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but there are things that we can do within those confined spaces that do challenge our bodies to the intensity that we need them to be in order to get the beneficial effects of exercise.
So what kind of exercises can you do in like a small hotel room?
Yeah, it's particularly hard. So what's recommended generally is combining in our everyday week, regardless of we're in a small space or not, is to do a mix of both aerobic and resistance training. So aerobic and resistance training are sort of like your fruits and vegetables of the exercise world. It would never be recommended to just do one and not the other. So in terms of the aerobic exercise, the things that we can do in a small space, and that might be aerobic activities like jogging on the spot, potentially use of shadow boxing, even things like that are more typically fun, like dancing or any sort of Zumba movements within a small space might be really good. Whatever is a repetitious movement that gets the heart rate up is considered aerobic. And then in terms of resistance training, any activities that are challenging the muscles to the point where they're exerting energy and you can feel the resistance and the tension. So things that are using your own body weight might be a good option for that as well.
Yeah, so apart from like using your body weight, what kind of equipments, like any features in the small room of a that you could use for exercise?
It's hard because of what might be available in that room might be different, but I can imagine a lot of people might be traveling with luggage. So potentially using their backpacks and filling clothes in their backpacks to use as weights on their back or on their chest, or using them to lift overhead might be a really good way of doing that, getting creative with what resources you have. However, there are lots and lots of exercises that you can do that doesn't require any equipment. And there are some great programs online, some great websites, and some great apps that show you a list of those exercises and how to perform them.
That's a really creative idea to use your backpack. Yeah, so how about the frequency and duration? How much is like enough?
Yeah, that's a good point. So what's recommended, the Australian recommended guidelines, which is also consistent with the World Health Organization, so it's across the board, is we should be doing at least 150 minutes of what's considered moderate to vigorous physical activity. So that's where we're getting the heart rate up a little bit. So if you're rating the intensity of your exercise out of 10, it would probably be around a 6 to 8 out of 10 in terms of difficulty. And so if you break that down within a week, we should be really be doing 30 minutes a day of moderate to vigorous physical activity. What's recommended is that we're doing 5 bouts of aerobic exercise, which is the cardio that we were sort of speaking about earlier, and 2 times doing resistance training at least. Obviously, the goals and the needs will be different, but depending on the individual, but this is the recommended guidelines. And both we know have very different benefits to the body. It's going to be particularly hard within the confined spaces here. So, and I know that issues around, ventilation might be a problem within these small rooms. So maybe it's not realistic and it might be uncomfortable to get into those real vigorous forms of physical activity for some people. They just might not enjoy it, might not feel very comfortable. So maybe focusing on more of the light to moderate activities, and doing that for a longer duration or breaking it up throughout the day might be a better alternative for people in isolation.
Yeah, I think that's definitely doable. So when we're isolated from others, it's really hard to stay motivated, which I struggled from as well during this whole lockdown thing. Do you have
Yeah.
any advice for getting started and staying committed?
Yeah, and I can relate to that too. I think it's particularly hard when we might normally, get motivated by exercising in groups, or we might get motivated by attending social sport or things like that, where we're accountable based off a group setting, or it does get hard, but I know that there are substitutions for that. And there's certain strategies that we can use. For example, the use of reminders on our phones and making a regular schedule can add some structure within the day. And I know that when there isn't any structure in the day, it can affect both our physical and mental health. And so providing a bit of a calendar or a bit of an itinerary within your day might be particularly useful. We also know that there's some great functions that we're doing, for example, like a Zoom, where you can do exercises online with groups. And I know that there are various gyms and sports classes that are offered through online platforms like this. But maybe I'd even recommend, linking up with friends, linking up with mates. And the benefit of this is that we can do it with anyone all around the world. So if family back home or different friends around the state want to exercise, you can actually arrange that and you can do joint sessions. But the other benefit, if you need more motivation, is there's great videos online that take you through classes. Just simply looking in YouTube, the options are endless, really. And similar with the apps that I was talking about before, there's a whole list of exercise apps that can help motivate people. And I think using goals, setting ourselves goals and setting a bit of a plan as to when you'd like to achieve that goal. So maybe by the end of this 2-week quarantine, I'd like to achieve so many push-ups, like 5 or 10 push-ups more than what I could do before. And that might give you a little bit more of an incentive to practice and get that repetition.
Yeah, I think those are really great tips. So I'm thinking that most of us know that exercise is really important for our physical health. And I know that you have done some researches on the link between mental health and exercise as well. Could you tell us a bit more about that connection there?
There's a whole lot of evidence looking at the role of exercise for our mental health, but also our physical health. There's a physiological adaptation with exercise for our mental health, but we also know that the simple act of increasing structure in our day, creating meaning and building that engagement through physical activity has more of a psychosocial impact on our mental health and well-being as well. So not only do we know that when we exercise, we can reduce our symptoms of depression and anxiety, but we also know that if we are more depressed or more anxious, we're more likely to be less physically active. So it's a kind of reciprocal relationship between the two. For more of the extreme ends, people with like a severe mental illness, so living with major depression, anxiety, PTSD, or psychosis, we know they're at much greater risk of physical health or chronic health conditions like cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. So exercise and healthy lifestyle, so including diet, and cutting out things like smoking, improving sleep quality. We know that these things relating to healthy lifestyle can actually significantly improve someone's health and well-being.
So if someone's like really stressed out, are there any particular types of activities that you would recommend?
Quite simply, I'd recommend whatever that person finds is the most enjoyable. And everyone is going to be different. The evidence says that the higher the intensity of the exercise, the greater it benefits in terms of our mood. However, what we know is that if someone is very sedentary and they're not doing much activity, doing something that's too intense might actually impact them because it could injure them, and it might be setting the bar too high. So in fact, choosing things that are relevant for the individual, they are tailored to meet the needs of that individual. So if you're not doing much, don't set the bar too high. Start light, start low and go slow, and choose things that you enjoy. So if things like yoga or Tai Chi or dancing or Pilates or any sort of boxing or fun movements that you are familiar with, they're generally the best things to go with. And looking at what options are online is such a good idea. The options are endless.
Yeah, so I know that most people in hotel quarantine must have traveled across time zones and might be experiencing like jet lags and sleep issues. Do you think exercise could help with sleep issues?
Most certainly, and exercise has been shown to significantly improve sleep quality, both within the general population and in people with a mental illness as well. So part of my PhD was actually looking at that exact topic and looking at the role of exercise in improving sleep. And what we found is in people in the general population, and in people with a severe mental illness, those that were more physically active, so meeting those recommended guidelines of 30 minutes a day, were much more likely to have a better sleep quality than those that didn't.
So how about for those who want to stay active after quarantine? Any last tips for them to stay active as part of their usual routine?
Yeah, so I mean, it's fantastic if they've gotten into a routine during quarantine. And in order to keep that up, I'd recommend, continuing with the same things around, creating structure, creating a routine, and also using targets or goals for progression. However, when you're back in the community, I think it would be really cool to explore what other options are in the community to help with building that social engagement. So things like sports teams, looking at discounted gym programs, or even looking at buying some home-based equipment that you could use that can increase the exercise library that you have access to within your own home. I think those are some really good strategies, but if possible, and depending on what happens with coronavirus restrictions, social sport is also a really great way of maintaining your physical activity levels. I like to think about sport, for me anyway, as sort of sugar coating your vegetables, like sugar coating your exercise. It's sometimes you realize you're being really physically active only after you've finished the activity because it was so fun. And for other people, that might be things like dance classes or yoga classes, whatever is relevant for what they like and what they enjoy.
Thank you so much, Oscar. That was some really helpful tips to stay active. We hope that you're now inspired to get active in your room. Check out the Move More in Quarantine page for helpful workout ideas to get started.